Hi, this is Jacob Wolf with ESPN Esports, and we're at the Longhorn Network during South by Southwest. I'm joined by Mark, and what is the proper pronunciation of your last name? I've heard Deppe. What is the right pronunciation?
Deppe is the key way to go.
Deppe. Yep. You're the director of esports at UC Irvine, one of the first schools that sort of was into esports in a major way. I would say probably one of the four leaders in terms of putting together a collegiate esports program and what that looks like. So sort of give me some of your background. How did you get involved with the school? How long have you been there, et cetera?
Yeah, I've been at UCI since 2010. I was hired to do events and programs for student government, so campus traditions, festivals, concerts, those kind of things. I was working on my MBA a few years later and ready to take a new direction with my career, and saw an opportunity to build esports. I'd seen how successful our students were. And then we noticed that other schools had started building programs, notably Robert Morris University in Chicago. And we thought we had a more compelling case with our successful students, our computer game design program, and just our location in the heart of the games industry in Southern California.
I was about to ask about that. Irvine obviously is the home of Blizzard Entertainment, and the majority of their studios, obviously corporate offices, are in Santa Monica, but is that a big influence of that and sort of the culture that you see at your school is a major game developing company being right there?
Yeah, I think the West Coast in general just has a lot of technology, and I think that's maybe why young people are comfortable with PC gaming and just being, I don't know, they're bred differently, I guess, or raised differently on the West Coast. And Southern California has some elite talent, and we found some really superstar players that just happen to be coming to UCI. And so I definitely think our geographic positioning is crucial for us.
So sort of walk me through how you built this esports program from sort of the ground up to where it is now.
Sure. So as I mentioned, we saw an opportunity in the summer of 2015. I was ready and willing to take on a new challenge. And so first group I reached out to were our gaming club leaders, and to see, to let them know I thought the campus should be providing some more support for them, and to see if they'd be interested in participating in like the building of something more official. Not surprisingly, they were thrilled at the idea and had been trying to make a contact with the administration for a while. And then kind of they held my hand and taught me about the world of esports, and me and some colleagues kind of helped cut all that red tape and make the proper kind of recommendations and introductions to administrators. And then as we went back and forth with administration, we found a way to build a cost-neutral business model that doesn't cost the university any money, and we actually found our own space. And so we solved the two hardest challenges, which are space and money when it comes to anything on college campuses. So that's what we did. We got the chancellor's blessing in December of 2015. We announced in March of 2016, built our arena over the summer, and then we opened our arena in fall of 2016, and we've been up and running for 2.5 years.
How small was sort of the club scale thing at UC Irvine for gaming clubs and esports clubs that were competing at a club level but not as a university official level? How small were those when you first sort of got involved?
They were big. The Association of Gamers at UCI might be the biggest club on campus. At that time, I think they had about 500 or 600 paid members.
Wow.
They're renting out ballrooms for their events, lecture halls for their meetings. They had won multiple national championships in League of Legends. Not the official national championship, but the big national tournaments that were being thrown through young students at the time, mostly in Texas, actually. And so we won those tournaments, and so when we showed up on the door, we already knew we had great talent. They were well organized. They were throwing massive events in our basketball arena, 36-hour long, tens of thousands of dollars in budget, and they were making money. And so they were well organized, well connected to the industry, and actually through some of their contacts, we met our first sponsors, which kind of helped get the ball rolling.
How is that scaled? What sort of size are you talking about now of just people who are interested and want to participate even if they aren't on your official teams?
Well, I'd say the clubs are very similar to what they have been historically. So they have hundreds of members that are paid to be in the club, but they have a sphere of influence of several thousand UCI students. And so we work really closely with them. We hire lots of their leaders to be staff with us. We let them do a lot of stuff in the arena. We support their big events. So I think it's been really complimentary. We handle the kind of elite competition for League and Overwatch. They help run the competitive stuff for other games, and they're definitely the leaders on the community and kind of helping you find your family on campus.
How important do you think it is to sort of channel into your existing properties rather than sort of build it separately? Some schools have done the one in terms of going to their clubs and making them official and bringing them into as a part of the university budget and plan, whereas others have just built an esports program where there are existing clubs and sort of alienate them. How important do you think it is to work with what you've got already?
Well, I think it's a really sensitive thing if you don't do it right. You're definitely trying to build something that students want, and all students generally want support from their university. But if you kind of have a hostile takeover of the esports world and don't work with your club and kind of have conversations and open dialogue with them, it can be frustrating. We've had some rough patches over the years with our clubs as well, but we're in a great place now, and I think we have a good understanding of how we can support each other. And so, yeah, we're a student affairs department, and I think there's a lot of strengths to what we've built, and because we work really closely with them, I think it's been more successful than it could have been otherwise.
So you mentioned that California, there is a little bit of the inherent game sense of people understanding video games at a different level. Obviously, being in the backyard of a major developer, it's something you kind of can't ignore. But I'm sure you've also talked to a lot of administrators at other schools and higher level people. When you're talking to some of these deans who have and high-level administrators who have had to make decisions on athletics and everything else, and they're asking you about esports, sort of what is the sense you get from a lot of those types of people? What do you think this is something they really want to invest in, or an opportunity to recruit more to their school? What do you think the motivations are generally?
It's a great question, and that's one of the first things I ask when I meet with people. Is like, what are your goals here? A lot of the schools that are creating scholarship programs are small private schools in the Midwest, and a lot of them are very intentional about doing it to make an admissions play. They're trying to get more interest in their school and their university, get the spotlight on them. You talk to the traditional athletic powerhouses, and we talk to everybody. Some of them don't feel that same need. They have more students interested in their school than they have available slots. And so they might be thinking of doing it to be an innovative leader, to build something that's new and exciting. But I would say the people who are really entrepreneurial about it right now are not the major power schools. They're the ones that feel they have room to grow. And I think that's kind of how UCI views itself. We don't have a football team. And so I think we think our gaming culture is pretty special, and we think that's a way that we can be the #1 in something that's really important and really relevant.
I think it's funny, we look behind us is what's there. We're in Texas. This is Austin, Texas, and obviously Texas Longhorns sort of theme network that we're sitting in their building at the moment. And obviously TESPA started here, the Texas Esports Association, which is now a part of Blizzard and organizes sort of all of their different titles started on campus, University of Texas. Do you see that opportunity of sort of taking a club to another level, not just within the school, but on a bigger level of organization? Do you think that's something that's still applicable, or do you think that market's very cornered for a lot of these developers and not allowing students those type of opportunities?
Well, I don't think, I mean, at the end of the day, administrators run universities, and so I think everyone wants to do things that students want, but at the end of the day, you have to have quote-unquote adults in the room helping to build the right structure, make sure it's well supervised, risk is mitigated, and that you have institutional knowledge. So some of the struggles that clubs have is you have great leaders, great players, and they graduate, and then the club's very different the next year. You see it over and over and over across the country of great powerhouse organizations and clubs that lose a lot of steam when people graduate. So at the end of the day, the university has to opt in. They have to have people on the ground, hopefully with facilities and a budget. So it's something that clubs, I mean, it feels so natural just to elevate the club. But at the end of the day, you really need a staff person that's going to champion this and put their weight and effort behind it to build what needs to be built.
You think that's the answer to the lack of consistency on a club level of obviously, like, this is a part of somebody's university life, but once they move on from that, you think the answer to that is having staff like you and others that are full-time dedicated to this specific thing?
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if the football team at Texas was run by students. Like there's a level of professionalism that you're not going to get. You're not going to have most 18 to 22-year-olds have the conflict resolution skills. They're not going to have the empathy. They're not going to know how to deal with people. Yes, students might have game knowledge and expertise in the game, but the thing I keep realizing more and more and more is you really need those kind of mature mentor influences around your program that help train people to be adults and mature and work as a team together. And I tend to think those are pretty separate skill sets from what students walk into universities with. So you either have to build that with students, but I think it's more appropriate to have some adults in the room that complement the students.
So how do you evaluate that? I certainly have seen a lot of universities hire people who we would sort of laugh at as esports consultants on LinkedIn that they're very new to the industry. They use certain buzzwords, and obviously when you're not as educated on the space, and whether you're a dean or a high-level administrator, it sounds all great to you, and then if you make that jump, you're now associated with someone that doesn't necessarily know what they're doing. But how do you sort of evaluate that, both the skill set and also the knowledge, when you're looking at hiring people into your program?
Yeah, you're definitely touching on an important thing, which is there's a lot of people who are talking big talk and might look good on paper. And if universities want to do esports, they don't know who to talk to. And so the first person that shows up on their doorstep might be the person they ended up hiring or paying to help them. With us, I mean, we have to do fully vetted kind of hiring and searches for people. I will tell you, like, I delegate a lot to my teams and my staff, but the one thing I make sure we all know is that I want to make the final decision on all people, because it's so important about who you let into your program. We have 67 students now in our program that get paid, whether you're a student or shoutcaster or front desk operator. And geez, it's such a big operation that if you have the wrong people in the room, like it can really slow things down or stall or mess things up. So getting the right players, the right coaches, the right staff that have a vision, that want to work hard, that have the right skills, it's crucial. So that's a skill set students probably don't have, the HR side of finding great talent and understanding what skills are important. You might just look at a Challenger League of Legends player or a superstar Overwatch player and be like, yes, I want you on my team. And then suddenly you realize 3 weeks in, like, this person can't work with anybody, and now they're dragging the whole team down. So I think that kind of perspective highlights why you need quote-unquote adults around.
So how do you recruit? What does a recruiting process look like for finding a high school student that is going to college in their future and someone that could fit into your university's team?
Well, we don't just look at high school students. We have multiple people who have gone from high school to pro to UCI or come right out of high school into our program, and then some we don't even know about till they show up on campus and emerge. So it's embarrassing to say we don't have a fully fledged, like, great locked-in recruiting process, but I mean, people identify themselves to us, whether it's through our online kind of recruitment form. They may message one of our players in solo queue who has a UCI tag on it, or they might recognize their name. Or coaches might let us know someone exists. So usually it's personal reference at this point, because we're really looking at, like, the top fraction of competitive players. So usually it's coming through a player or coach reference at this point. But like I said, we still have just embarrassing talent that shows up without us actively pursuing them. And so it's a combination of those things. Then we host tryouts over the summer and then have our team ready to go early fall.
So how do you improve that? Is there a technology you think that should be built? Is there a certain, like, type of program that you think should be built? And not just for UCI, but for all the schools, you know, rather than just, like, scouring a ladder or doing off personal reference. Do you think that there's an easier way to find students and a technology that could be built to help that?
Certainly. I mean, there are apps out there. There's a lot of companies creating products for recruiting. It's different than traditional sports. You can't go watch a high school team play usually, right? Like, they're just starting to exist, actually. And we're not always recruiting from high school. We're recruiting from anyone who wants to play. They could be undergrads, graduates, they could be high school students. So I think there are tools we could probably use to track our prospects better. In terms of finding those prospects, it's a little challenging. And really the only way to look for them, I mean, is based on their solo queue ranking, and that's only a part of the story. It's not going to tell you.
It doesn't show you their age. It doesn't show you.
Yeah, it doesn't show you any of that stuff. What their grades look like. It doesn't show you their communication skills. You can get a sense for the heroes they play and their flexibility and versatility, but maybe they've never played on a team before. So. Yeah, I think there probably will be some products that we use in the future. Right now, it's again, we're only looking to recruit a handful of players a year, probably 5 at most. So we can be very hands-on with everybody. And so for the moment, I don't feel any pain points around the technology side. I think more so it's finding great players that have great grades that want to contribute to a good team environment.
That technology sounds like something some of your students could build, some of your student engineers.
They could, yeah. And I don't think we need to build it, but I'm sure there's a lot of products that could be modified right now that we could work on.
Certainly. So It's sort of incredible to me. What's really interesting about collegiate esports is you mentioned that you guys launched December 2015, or you got approval from your administration staff in December 2015. Just how rapidly it's grown in the last 3 years and 3 months, really, as a space. It's something I think is increasingly relevant now and will only get more relevant. Why do you think that is? What has sort of put, the proverbial foot up the whatever, and sort of jumpstart this for everyone?
Well, I just had a talk in South by Southwest, and I talked about why I think esports are relevant, and I think its expectations are shifting for how we compete. We used to be okay with local leagues where you're separated by age and gender and sport and geography. I think we used to be okay with competing locally against just the people that you could actually meet up and play in person. I think we used to be okay with having referees kind of be a force deciding who wins a game. And I think esports changes a lot of those dynamics that meet our current expectations. So first of all, I mean, when we're online, we expect almost everything to be free. Information should be free. And esports, when you watch it, it is free. When you're competing against people of your ability level, regardless of where they live, their age, their gender, what language they speak. So I think we want to compete against people who are our ability peers, not necessarily that look like us necessarily. And so I think those are some of the major factors, and I think esports is the information revolution's reinvention of how we compete, of competition. So it's just like Facebook's disrupted a lot of industries and Amazon. I think esports is disruptive, and I think it is meeting where young people, meeting them where they are, and it's how we want to compete and who we want to compete against moving forward.
So make the case for me on that note.
Yeah.
Obviously, I won't argue esports are relevant. It's what I do every single day and have for the last 3.5 years of my life professionally. So it definitely is important. But make the case for me as to why, if you're a very high-level skilled player and you're 16, 17 years old, why is collegiate esports a good path versus trying to go pro?
Great question. We hear the term path to pro all the time, right? And for me, I'm frustrated with the term because it insinuates that professional is that ecosystem's a great destination. And you've been around long enough. You know, and I know that pro careers are pretty short, and you don't make enough money, and you don't acquire enough life skills to be successful for the rest of your life. You're not going to retire on your earnings in esports. So collegiate esports has huge value because while you're playing a game that you love, you're building those skills, you're building your social network, you're living a well-balanced life while pursuing a degree. And we have players that want to leave next year to pursue professional career, and they may come back. We've had players go pro and come back. But I think ending up with a college degree is so important because it's setting you up for life. It's going to be something employers look for. And you'll have gotten all these rich experiences, met at a diverse group of people that will change how you look about the world. And so you don't get that in esports. You don't get that in a gaming house where your laundry's done for you, food's prepared for you. You kind of emerge out of a dark gaming house a year or two later, and you're like, what do I do next? And so if you want to compete at the highest level, pro esports is definitely the way to go. But I think if you want to set yourself up long term, I think college esports is a great part of your journey.
Do you think there's ever a world, and this is very far out, but if you look at League of Legends, there's an academy system, and obviously the major leagues, or there's secondary systems in Europe. You look at Overwatch, they have contenders, and then they have the Overwatch League itself. Do you think there's ever a way, though, that some of these developers and sort of the ecosystem becomes where college could be the middle step for some of these people naturally, just like it is for professional, traditional sports?
Yeah, I do think so. I think it could be perceived as right below professional. I mean, our teams are at that level. They're tier 2, tier 3 for Overwatch, and they're just below probably academy teams, but right at the level of challenger teams right now in League of Legends. So I definitely think that's the case. That's where their skills are. I think necessarily they will be less talented because they play the game way less. We're practicing and having team functions maybe 15 hours a week, and the pros are playing 10 to 12 hours a day. So we're never going to be at that level without that amount of practice, or without a lot more practice. But I do think college will start to look like the tier 2 system.
What do you think it has to take for that to happen? What has to change from sort of the current environment?
I think young gamers need to get good grades so they can go to college. That needs to happen. And I think colleges need to build more programs that are all across the United States that can kind of pull the best talent from every region. So I think a few things need to change, but I think having young gamers take academics seriously, where they understand the best gamers right now are not going to college, to be very honest. Like, they've played too much, they've maybe dropped out of high school. So it's only like the unicorn that we're able to find once in a while that has an amazing GPA, is interested in school, and also has played video games a lot. So it's really hard for us to find those superstars. But when that pool gets deeper and we recruit, and you see all the top ranked players in the US all are getting 3.8 GPAs, I think you'll see collegiates take a huge step up.
Do you think there's ever a world where major universities sort of devalue that, like they do in traditional sports, where some of them just don't care about the GPA as long as you're a good player and you make them money?
I think that's a fear, for sure. I think when the incentive for winning is really high, I think that could be something that happens. My hope for esports, and I hope to be part of this, I hope we spread out the resources differently than we do in college sports. I think players should be more compensated. I think we shouldn't be, the superstar school shouldn't be taking all the money in based on the work of their young players. So I think we need to figure out how to distribute it so everyone's getting a fair shake and everyone's getting a fair amount of resources, but there's not such a compelling amount of money going into the university that winning by cheating is such a powerful incentive. So anyways, that's my hope. But I am afraid, like, at some point there will be schools that let you in, and I'm sure there are schools right now where they have much lower requirements than we do. And at some point, if your goal is just to get a free education and play college esports, then we may not be able to compete with those people.
So answer me this: a lot of these Power 5 universities are finally starting to get into this. You see things like Utah, Ohio State, some of these others that are getting into this, and other colleges that are outside of that sort of scope, but that are major universities, Boise State and others, sort of come to mind. What do you think the benefit for them, those types of schools that are already massive and have huge admission and athletics, what do you think the benefit for them is to have an esports program?
Well, I think those are very interesting schools to mention for those exact reasons. Some schools are trying to be the next Boise State, next Ohio State. I say I want to be the Duke basketball of esports. Hopefully, I don't think they're a rival with Texas. No,
but they're good.
They are good, and you understand what I mean when I say that, right? Yeah. Top coaches, top players, the great facilities, all that stuff. I think I will say very honestly, I think it takes a special person at each of these universities to champion it. I know the folks at all those universities you mentioned, and honestly, they have a champion at each school that thinks esports important, and they've convinced their peers that it is important. So. Yeah, we've talked a lot about the staff, and I will say, even though staff don't feel like an important element, maybe for a lay person or an outsider, but they're really what build a program and by consensus and do the hard work behind the scenes to build college sport programs. And so that's something you will see at those three schools are people that are entrepreneurs and hustlers and that believe and love what they're doing.
So let's talk budget allocation. I always find this conversation very interesting. Some schools have sort of taken the mantra of having their esports budget allocation come from their athletics department. Others have, like Utah, have taken it from their engineering department and made it a part of their curriculum track, and where you can go and learn about esports, not only playing it, but also learning how to work in it, right, as part of their game design program. Is there, sort of walk me through first the benefits of both. How do they differ from your perspective? Well,
we're a third option. We're the student affairs option. So we are separate from that. We are not in athletics. We are not in an academic unit. We are in student affairs. And there are several schools that are building it out through that space. Some are doing it in club sports, like UCLA and Berkeley are doing it that way. So there's different reasons to do it different places. Athletics. I mean, if we were to be in athletics, I will say some of the things that would be easier would be our players would get priority registration because they'd be considered athletes by the university. The university is comfortable with them recruiting players and admitting people based on skill. Those are battles that we're still kind of like convincing campus leaders that this is an okay thing. So I think some of the traditional things, the athletics, some of their core competencies would add a lot to that conversation. On the academic side, I think it's really interesting. Schools and academic units often have the most flexibility in what they do because of academic freedom, and they're also some of the best funded units sometimes. And so that could be a good space where you're both well-funded, you're really aligning with the academic mission of the university, but then you might not be able to do some of those things that athletics might be really competent at. And student affairs is interesting too, because I think we're really interested in the whole co-curricular outside of the classroom experience for students. And so you're going to see things that we focus on, from kind of a really healthy life balance to thinking about the player mentally and physically. And that's why we have a team psychologist and exercise physiologist. We're really focused on diversity and inclusion, so making sure everyone has a space at the table and is able to access esports. But historically, student affairs units are really poorly funded, which is why we don't get any money from the university, actually. We're fully self-sufficient with our arena, our sponsorships, and our philanthropy that we've kind of been able to gather over the years. And so those are different models. I think it's definitely interesting for universities to think about it. If I can make one more comment, I would say that the small private schools, the NAIA schools, have a much more comfortable time putting those in athletics, because there's no big money in their football and basketball programs. They're not fighting the battle of amateurism with their, like I said, the football and basketball teams, where your kid in esports is earning a keyboard and maybe makes $10 a month on their Twitch channel. There's not that forced amateurism, that it's really hard to put that next to a superstar basketball player or a football player. So that's why I think you don't see them popping up in D1 schools in athletics.
You know, some of that consideration, as some of these major schools look at that, is the daunting overhead of the NCAA. Mm-hmm. About a month ago, obviously, they had their really large conference that they do annually, and they made a big, very fuss via the press that they were going to be talking about esports that day, and they got right to the very end, and essentially their spiel was like, we've evaluated this, we're not necessarily sure what to do with it, there's misogyny problems, which I won't disagree with, there certainly are, mm-hmm. And we don't want to touch violent video games, which is just it's something that's been, I think we're all drowned out about from the Olympics and the NCAA both. But you look at that, and is there a place for someone like the NCAA in esports?
Whew, you're asking all the good questions. So I strongly feel that a third-party governing group is probably not going to emerge. There are groups out there that are saying that they are the governing body.
NACE and others.
Yeah, we're not a member of any of them. I strongly feel that because the games are independently owned and they're private IP, I think the game companies that want college esports to exist and thrive need to build that ecosystem, and they need to build it really well. Otherwise, we'll go play someone else's game. So my sense is that for the immediate future, that's going to be what happens. I would say it would be great if there were best practices, if universities could all agree on what recruiting looked like and kind of have some anti-poaching rules so you're not stealing players or coaches. Make sure that academic requirements are all kind of aligned. But I don't think that any governing body can have the teeth or weight to kick you out of your esports competitions because they don't control the tournaments right now. So I'm comfortable with the ecosystem right now. I'm very comfortable with it, and I think we get to hold game developers accountable for building a great space that's predictable, that has great rules, great oversight. And if they don't, then we move on to different games. So I'm comfortable with the ecosystem, and maybe someday the federal government or Department of Education kind of gives us some guidelines. That could be something that happens. But to your point, I don't see the NCAA or another group being able to get in, and I think that's why some of the reasons they're making the comments they are is because they know they don't control it right now. They can't touch it.
Is the only way you sort of push back at a game developer, is the only way you can do that is just leaving their game? Because at the end of the day, they have veto power, right? Like, they can tell you they don't care about your opinion and they're going to do what they want to do. And is that the only recourse?
I don't think so. I mean, we are really fortunate to have really great conversations with them. We work closely with both Blizzard and Riot. We have their ear, and so we give them feedback very regularly on the tournaments. They've taken a lot of the things that we've said are pain points, and I'm sure they're pain points for other universities, and made changements from tournament structure to scheduling to who's running the bracketing system. Those are all been things that they've adjusted. I think we look at diversity and inclusion as a major weakness still. Yep. They're still building games where there's just a lot of misogyny, as you've highlighted, and hypersexualization of women. They definitely could create an ecosystem that was more welcoming to different people that don't look like your traditional stereotypical gamer. So I don't think our only recourse is leaving their game. I hope that's not the only recourse. I think those of us that are looked to as leaders in the space need to kind of voice our opinions and thoughts, and need to talk with game developers and work with them. And I think I'm sensing right now, actually, with both those companies, they are looking to bring in voices from the collegiate space and have them help create rules and regulations. I think that is coming pretty soon.
You mentioned diversity and inclusion, and it's sort of appropriate that it's a focus for some of these collegiate esports programs, because the way that we, as a gaming industry generally, get more diverse in the types of characters in games, and those backgrounds and those lores and stories, but also the people that you have to have the people develop the games, where it's not just a bunch of white guys in a room sort of brainstorming how to make a character that is not that doesn't look like them, or doesn't have the backstory that they have. And so I think it's very important, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, that you do have female engineers and female game designers and writers and people of color in those roles as well. Sort of from your perspective, do you think that by trying to bolster that on a competition level and bringing in more people of color and women in a competition level also can contribute to that, of having more people pursue these careers and those college degrees that will eventually make them go on and participate in game development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need more diverse workforce generally, and I'll say UCI puts a huge premium on inclusive excellence. Some of the programs that we've done with our program, we do a girls in gaming summer camp, so we invite young high school aged girls to kind of come hang out with us for a week, and we show them all the different careers in esports, from game design to streaming to shoutcasting to hosting to playing professionally. We do that for low income students as well. So we're trying to start building that pipeline of more diverse talent, and that comes to some of the high school efforts that we're doing as well. And I'll say our high school efforts are about to go into middle school too, because middle schools are jumping at the bit to get involved in esports. So I think we do a lot of things. We need to signal that it's important that women and underrepresented folks are wanted and welcome, and you are wanted and welcome. So if you ever don't feel that way, come to UCI. I think we need to show them role models that look like them, that are already doing it, because there are a lot of great people out there that are already in the esports industry, building games, making games, playing games. And I think we need to really work on that pipeline and create programs and incentives and start working with people as early as late elementary school. I think that's when people decide if you're good at STEM or not. And so I think it's a tough challenge, and I think we don't have all the answers. We have a lot of questions and a lot of energy to help be a part of the solution, but I think having the right people designing the games look like society around them, and then having programs and efforts to welcome young people into those spaces. I think that's how we're going to fix it, but it's going to be slow and it's going to be painful, and I think we're not going to move as fast as I would like to, or as others would like to.
So how do you destigmatize gaming in youth? And I'll say I think that's probably one of the bigger reasons that women in particular are not involved in gaming at this moment at a higher level, is because there's a huge stigma against that. Girls don't play video games as kids, and that's just not right. And nearly like having that stigma is terrible. So how do we get rid of that?
Well, I think it comes to role modeling. A lot of it, you need to have women playing the game and on camera. You need to have their faces shown, and people need to know they exist. People like you and me need to encourage them to be in the space. Some of it's societal, some of it's parental, some of it's family, different family values, cultural values. Some of it's stuff that I can't affect right away. But I think from highlighting superstars in the space, we have a little bit of a spotlight on us. We're able to celebrate the success of a lot of the women that are in our program. We actually have, of my staff, 80% of them are actually women. So we try to celebrate their success. We have great women all throughout our program, great faculty that are women at UCI. So we have to make sure they're in the spotlight, and then I think we have to do these programs to bring women together, to build a cohort, to know that they are part of a group of people that care about it. And so, yeah, it is a challenge, and I'm happy we're talking about it, actually.
Yeah, of course. I'm very happy to be talking about these things too. And I think the next question I have for you from a university perspective: how do you assess like charitable efforts to be able to go help people who are underprivileged to get access to games? It's no secret that a gaming PC costs several $1,000s to construct or to buy one, right? It's not easy, and that's why we see a lot more diversity in consoles in particular, because there's an easier entry point, or you can get them through arcades or PlayShare, right? we don't have the PC cafes of South Korea that are literally every 5 minutes away, like walk-wise. So anybody can get plugged in. So how can a university like UCI sort of help that part of it and make it more diverse in that way?
Well, one of our major outreach efforts is the North America Scholastic Esports Federation that we help partner with. We have 2 full-time staff dedicated to it. So we're building out free esports in high schools and soon to be middle schools. So schools almost always have computers. They almost always have internet. Some of them might not be high-end gaming PCs that you need for the high-end games, but certainly League of Legends can be played on a lot of different computers. And so going into student spaces, making sure there's no cost of entry for young people. And our league also goes into community spaces like Boys and Girls Clubs, Girl Scouts, YMCAs. Libraries are starting to get into it. So I think those traditional spaces that young people hang out in, I think we need to bring esports into those places, validate it, make it official, give them role models, make sure they're mentors and kind of being looked after and watched and supervised. But it is hard when you have the other kids who are getting all those resources and then go play on a $3,000 PC at home for 4 more hours a night. So I think it's going to always be hard to cross that technology gap. It will probably exist for as long as there are giant economical differences between classes. But I think you need to take esports into spaces where young people are, make it as accessible as possible, and build it into education. It'll make education more exciting and relevant, and I think it'll engage young people and create more opportunities for them.
So I have another question, different segment for you, but violent video games, it is something that is, the NCAA mentions every time they talk about esports, but a lot of people, especially in college, sort of talk about that. Shootings are an unfortunate fact of life. I had to cover some of myself, and obviously it's even this past week, there was a mass shooting in New Zealand. But there was also an Oxford study recently that was published in the last couple of weeks saying that there is no scientific link between violence in video games and violence in real life, and you know, obviously there's different reasons that people do commit those crimes. When you look at that from a university perspective, or just a company perspective in general, some of the biggest games in our industry are shooting games. Counter-Strike Global Offensive, even Overwatch in a much more cartoony sense, but Call of Duty, others. How do you approach those and bringing those game titles into what you're doing?
Well, fortunately, we have game scholars on our campus that publish about this. They are very outspoken about this, and there have been studies going back and forth throughout the years, and some will say there's a small connection, some say there's no connection, like the recent one. But I think anecdotally, if you were to walk around a group of gamers, they look like your average students, much more so than like a traditional sports team would be. And I think honestly, they're normal people, and I don't think games that, in my experience, have any sort of effect. I actually have a 3-year-old, and I was watching Cars 2 with him the other day, and there's scenes where bullets are flying in cartoon movies. So I think video games get a very unfair shake when it comes to blame for the scourges or the ills of society. They're an easy target, but I don't think they are any more impactful than any other form of media, whether it be music or movies or television. I mean, our American history is very violent. We teach that in schools. So I don't think there's a way students aren't exposed to violence. I don't think video games make you violent. And so on our campus, we do talk about it. We talk about all the concerns, all the reputational risks that are involved from all the different things that you could be concerned about. But when it comes down to it, I think we look at what we see in the academic literature, and it's compelling enough for us to think that we don't think we're doing anything wrong by offering games that have a little bit of violence in them. And some people think League of Legends is too violent because you're killing minions and people die. But yeah, so it's a conversation we have, but I think we've overcome that at this point.
Do you think there's a cartoon separation between like Overwatch and Counter-Strike?
I think there's a different level. Yeah, some people are more comfortable without the blood and the real bullets and the actual guns that you could go buy theoretically. I would also say in Counter-Strike, I mean, the bombs, that's an issue, that's a sensitive topic on college campuses.
Terrorists, non-terrorists. Yeah.
Absolutely, terrorists versus non-terrorists. That's a huge political kind of like East-West or East and Middle East or West and Middle East kind of, I don't know, conflict / like, yeah, political issues there. So I think Counter-Strike has multiple issues, but I think if we thought it was a really important e-sport, I think we can make a case for it. But for right now, we're staying away at the moment from that one.
On the note of Valve, and I always find this very interesting, how do you approach a developer that has zero interest in organizing esports for themselves? And you know, do you go through like Collegiate Star League or some of these third parties that organize things? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mentioned we like the developers that build a nice ecosystem and hire staffs. I've never talked to anybody at Valve, and it's not from lack of interest or trying. They're happy with their business model and are being very successful the way they are. So yeah, if our teams want to compete, they would do it through the Collegiate Star Leagues of the world. And we don't have scholarships for those games, partly because there's no official nice collegiate league that we think is really polished and well run and is going to exist for a long time. Yeah, I think it's a challenge to work with developers that don't want to work with you. I think Nintendo is another one where they have a great game. They have Smash is this phenomenon, and we would love. Indeed. We have a huge Smash community at UCI, very successful teams. So, yeah, I mean, we want to work with developers. We think they're a crucial part of everything we do. But when our students want to compete, and these are from the club levels that we're competing in these games, they just play in the best tournaments available.
Do you see that changing with third-party organizers or governing bodies? Obviously, ESPN announced this past week the Collegiate Esports Championship finally with Street Fighter and several different Blizzard titles, and Street Fighter is not one that's actually organized at a collegiate level, and that will be going through CSL. But do you see some of those games where they're like Smash and like Counter-Strike, where there is this huge sort of buy-in from fans and people of college age? Do you see that being a pathway to sort of get more involved in those games through third-party organizations?
Well, even those third parties, I mean, you have to either work with the developer to get those rights to play their games, or you have to do it and hope they don't kind of send you a letter. Yeah, come after you. So I don't think the developers are ever uninvolved. I'm sure Blizzard was very involved in the ESPN conversation. I know they were. So I don't think that changes the conversation. I think even organizing bodies, they still have to work with the developers, they're the IP owners. So that might make it easier for the Dota 2s and the Counter-Strikes and Smashes of the world to exist on a grassroots level. But yeah, I think anybody that wants to do something big in esports, the bigger it becomes and the more successful it is, the more developers are going to pay attention and want to be a part of it.
Well, wouldn't that make a case study for NACE being important? Or like, rather, you know, UC Irvine might not be able to get an audience with Valve, but UC Irvine, Boise State, Utah, Ohio State, Berkeley, whatever it may be, all these different schools come together and maybe they get a representation to Valve or using them as an example, Nintendo, Capcom, any of these developers that don't have an inherently collegiate-based system. Yeah,
well, I would say with NACE, I would be more comfortable if they frame themselves as a and I think they're starting to do this, more of a member-run organization and less of a governing body, because I think that's misleading. I think it's misleading for them to say, we want to be a collective voice for universities, and I think they're shifting that way, which is good. Unless like we run college esports, and a lot of people want to say that, and NCAA probably would like to say that too. So I think there is some huge incentive for there to be a collective voice. I don't know if it's NACE or some other thing that has yet to exist or that does exist, but I don't know. I don't know if that would sway Valve. I feel like they're a smart company and somehow they're missing this opportunity, or they don't see the opportunity, or they look at it and say college esports is not for us. So I don't know how to evaluate what they're doing or not doing. I think general consensus in the community is Valve should be more involved, Nintendo should be more involved, and they're not.
There is a tight-knit community of directors of esports across various different universities. You mentioned earlier that you talked to a lot of those different people. You know, do you know the current number of schools that offer scholarships for esports? I mean, it's plus 150, I know it is, but
you know, I look at the ESPN website.
It goes up all the time. I don't know the
website when I want to look at that. And then the whole idea of what defines a college esports varsity program. Yeah. I usually like to see scholarships, a coach, a facility, an official kind of university branding and marketing, that kind of stuff. Those are my kind of entry points to become a varsity program. But I think a lot of the announcements that you go out there, like no one's checking to see what actually gets built. Yeah. So you get added to the list if you just make an announcement. So I don't know. I don't think I have any more accurate information than anybody else. I probably talked to about 350 schools in the last few years. Some are very involved. They'll send delegations to come meet with us. Some will call us a bunch of times, come meet with us. Some we have some tools for schools that we share publicly with our initial budget, our initial business plan, our arena layout, some job descriptions. We're going to polish that up and make it a better resource moving forward. But yeah, so it is a cool group, and we're all kind of interested in seeing each other succeed. And I definitely am thankful to Kurt Melcher for taking my couple calls when we built our program. Call him the Godfather, and I'm very thankful for what he's helped lead.
So, do you think there's a world where those people sort of formalize more than just being friends with one another and being colleagues and giving business advice, but rather, you know, if you don't like NACE or you don't like the NCAA, and a world where you guys kind of create an association that can help sort of create some balance and some consistency across universities? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I was at a League of Legends championship last year, and someone's like, I'm going to start a Discord channel right now, and I think they did, and it didn't go anywhere, but I think that kind of thing would be great. Maybe a directors organization or something like that. Maybe not for programs, but for directors to get together and talk about their challenges, their questions, their thoughts, their visions, where they want to go. I could see like having a conference and
a few of those, but not very big yet.
Yeah, and I think you just got to make sure your vision for what you're trying to accomplish is aligned before you set all that up. But I'm sure at some point there will be a more organized structure for all of us to kind of weigh in on things. But I think we don't even know who the right people at the table are still at this point.
What do you think about when some of these athletic conferences evaluate some of this opportunity, right? Like the Pac-12 made that huge announcement, and I did a lot of reporting on why that failed. But obviously, like they said, oh, we're going to do this, and they never did it. And a lot of their schools still exist in esports. A lot of the schools that were going to participate. And there are some others as well that have done this, worked with Riot to create their own sort of intersector league. Big Ten Network is one of those, and even though it's not the Big Ten themselves, it is an affiliate.
Yeah.
But you look at that. Do you think that's something that has a future, or do you think we're going to still stand a little bit more on the CSL or UL or whatever it may be sort of platform where it's a game-specific thing?
I think those conferences are really good for esports. I will say that. I think it brings a lot of attention and validation. I think those have been positive influences. I don't think they're the future necessarily. I think honestly, I look at esports and I think they're disruptive. I think it will disrupt how we look at sports traditionally. I think conferences were built because of geographic regionality, and that's kind of gone away a little bit with some of the redistricting of schools. But I think geography means a lot less in esports, and so I don't mind if I'm competing against a junior college or Ohio State. I want to play against the best teams that are out there, and so I think when you start adding in conferences, you start playing against people, certain schools, not because they're your ability level or they're great competition, but because there's some history there. And I feel like esports is more forward-looking than that, and it's looking towards a different future and a new power balance, I guess, in college athletics or college sports.
Do you think that's part of the reason that some of the most successful schools competitively in collegiate esports, UC Irvine, RMU, Maryville, these others are smaller universities because they're more nimble and they can adapt quicker and do things like you've done and create a very pretty large-scale program relative because your school can move a little bit faster than being a massive university with a lot of hoops to jump through, I guess.
Well, I will say, first of all, we're definitely a massive university with a lot of hoops to jump through. We're definitely the size of those big schools. We have 35,000 students, and yeah, we're the #1 applied to school for California residents last year. So think of all the California schools, and we're #1. So UCI is definitely on the radar. But I think you're hitting on the right point, which is we don't have that pride and that tradition from an athletic standpoint that a lot of other universities do. I think we have that kind of underdog mentality. We're anteaters. We're kind of cut from a different fabric, I think we think. So yeah, I think when you look at those other schools, they're very comfortable with the current model, right? They're some of the big powerhouse schools. They're doing very well with the traditional athletics NCAA sport model. And so there's not a lot of incentive for them. But if you believe, as I do, that it's disruptive, that this is where young people are headed, and that the fans of traditional stick and ball sports are getting older and less diverse, I'll say that. I think if you look at where the future audience is, the future consumer base of the world, it's young people, and those people are into esports. And so that's why I think it's disruptive. I think it's a sign of the times, and I think it's what technology is doing to competition, and it's as I said earlier, it's kind of shifting competition to meet our 21st century expectations.
So I'll ask you this. So there are a lot of large dynastic schools in the University of California system that are your sisters, right? Have you, and some of them have already announced that they're wanting to get more into esports. Do you find yourself having conversations with administrators at other schools, sort of in your sister groups?
Absolutely, yeah. The UC schools, not only are we sister schools, but their clubs are all very good. If you look up and down the UC system, their schools are always competing highly in League and Overwatch and the other titles. They're some of our best competition. So definitely talk to all of them. Some are building spaces. Some are trying to figure out how to do it. Some schools are missing the boat entirely, which is unfortunate. But I think UC schools are really well positioned to be successful if they choose to be. And if we're talking crazy big ideas or conferences, I think the UC system could be its own conference, to be honest. It'd be schools with equal admission standards. It'd be schools all in the same kind of time zone, and all schools that are very good competitively in esports. So not that needs to happen, but I do think UC schools are a unique, interesting place where a bunch of smart people show up and love video games.
So I'll end on this.
Yeah.
What is the future of collegiate esports? It's grown a lot in the last 3 years, but where does it go now?
I think it's going to keep exploding. I think in a few years we're going to have 1,000 schools doing it. Hopefully we're offering full scholarships, and there's all the bells and whistles that come with having a great competitive program. So more staff, more competition for players and resources and all that good stuff. But I think college esports is going in a very positive direction. I think it will definitely make an impact on the coming generations.
Awesome.